Spurs up, Carolina fans. This is Phil Harris here at the Ruckin Roosters Show. I am joined with a very, very special guest this time around. He is the assistant coach, one of the assistant coaches for Carolina Rugby. His name is Anthony Coggiola, and he goes by Tony. Tony, how the hell are you?
I'm doing great, sir. How are you?
Excellent. Happy to have you on here. Let's get right into your background. You're a great storyteller. I know that from our talks at With You weekend. But I wanted to talk about your background first. What did where are you from originally?
Really, I played a lot of different sports in high school, and I think that point's going to come back a little bit when you talk about rugby.
Yeah.
And you get players that haven't really played rugby. So, I boxed, I wrestled, I ran track, I played football, and I played football in college. And I just didn't really enjoy the game that much anymore.
Sure.
And so I was at Wofford, which is where in Spartanburg, where John Roberts is originally from, and John played at Wofford for a year. And so my junior year, I was just starting to get some game time because I played a very specialized position, which, as we all know, rugby favors all body sizes. So
Absolutely.
There's different ways to start off. Like I started off in second row because I'm 6'2" and untrained, so they don't want me to damage stuff. And then they kind of start moving you out as your game develops.
Yep.
So I gave up my scholarship after my junior year and entered into an Army contract. So I was going to go straight into the Army.
Wow.
After college. And so I went to Air Assault School in 101st as a cadet. And so they're tying you off with a tower, and they look at me and they're like, dude, how much do you weigh? 230, 235. And they're like,
right.
Dude, you need to go on Slim Eagle. So basically the Army has a height and weight issue with me. So I had to get rid of that the football mass.
Sure.
And kind of cut weight.
Mm-hmm.
And so me and another buddy of mine, I was on track to go into Special Forces. He was on track to go to the Rangers. So we started training, doing long, slow distances, multiple 15-mile runs during the week, a lot of fartleks. And Sherman Chiropractor in Spartanburg has a program, and I don't know what the deal is in the Southern Hemisphere, but we have a lot of chiropractor schools. So we get a lot of Kiwis and a lot of Aussies that come over. So Sherman was revamping their rugby team with a bunch of foreign nationals, and hey, you guys want to play rugby? And so that was my introduction. I had two missions. One was Army and trimming weight and getting in shape, and certainly rugby does that.
Oh yeah.
Then I fell in love with the game. Just absolutely fell in love with the game.
That's awesome. That's great. I mean, that's a great story there about your origin story with rugby. I don't detect a Southern accent. Where are you from originally?
So my dad was an IBMer, and he was stationed in the Air Force. Some early technology that IBM had. It was Wilson Machinery back then. And so he married my mother, who was from Southern Mississippi. And when I was 1, we moved to upper state New York.
Ah, okay. All right. Fair enough. That explains it. So Wofford, you spent some time there with John Roberts, right? Playing a little football, went into the Army, Special Forces, track, found rugby that way. What's this international rugby experiences that you've had? Tell me about that real quick.
Yeah. So when I I graduated from Wofford, changed out of my robe, put on my uniform, sworn in the military. 3 days later, I went into the Army. I went into the Army Infantry School. And so after the Army Infantry School, I was waiting to go to phase training, which is the long Special Forces program. And my wife had transferred to the University of Georgia for international business.
Okay.
And so I was up there and I started playing with UGA. So kind of picked rugby back up again, lot of second row until I started learning what I was doing, until I was breaking out. And then I did my Army training, went to work for Richland County Sheriff's Department, worked out with the Old Grays. Then went to war, came back, went and taught at Texas A&M, and I got really involved with Texas A&M. So it was a club team then. So I would play, sub in at A or play B in 15s. And then in the summer we would combine, and I played sevens with Texas A&M.
Right.
7 years of really intense rugby. Kind of another legend that comes out of that area, a guy named Grant Cole.
Oh yeah, I know Grant. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think I saw a picture of you guys together.
Yeah, man. Grant's a great dude. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, he had a really good friend. So he coached me, and then we started the men's kind of the graduate school side, and we were D3, and they didn't have D3 playoffs back then, but we went for Texas Rugby Union. We went all the way up and won D3. That includes Louisiana, like Shreveport and Beaumont. Well, that's Texas. Lafayette. So we played a lot of those clubs. Really good rugby. And then I was playing against the Huns. I was playing against Fort Worth, and then an international tour of a guy from Texas that moved to Washington State. I think they were D1, and they needed some. They need some utility players. And back to what I was telling you, I started off as second row, and then I learned, weak side 6, and then I learned open side 7, and I played a lot of number 8 as well. So when you're a utility player, you get a lot more chances to be on the field as you look at your injuries and whatnot. So we went overseas. We played in England, Wales, Ireland, Scotland. And then I was on a military tour. I always bring my kit with me, and I did a friendly in Australia, and that was really interesting.
I bet so.
So that's some of my international experience.
Listen, I bet there's a lot of stories that we could get into about those specific trips, but we'll save that for another day, probably not during the live stream. But this is really, really cool. I mean, talk about you're talking about how you started with second row. That's the position that I play. We're taller guys, so obviously, when people see us, oh, you need to play in the second row. But it's kind of cool that you were able to transition as well to be a 6, 7, and 8. That's generally not something that takes place for a lot of players out there. That 6, 7, and 8 kind of can interchange a little bit, but not from second row. That's pretty cool that you did that. I feel like you've had 5 different lives. You're talking about stuff that's just most people would be their banner moment. You know what I'm saying? But you've done so much in your life. College football player, Green Beret, international rugby experience, successful rugby coach. We haven't talked about that yet, but we'll get to it. Entrepreneur, State Department employee. What are you most proud of?
Being a father and a grandfather.
Nice.
Yeah, I absolutely. My wife's my high school sweetheart.
Wow.
I love that the most. One thing I will tell you though about two things you really made up, like the transition in international play and collegiate play. And I'm not going to be hard on the referees because I know a lot of the referees, a whole lot of them.
Sure.
And had some of them coach me like Nigel. But when you play international, there's so much more advantage that's given. So the game flows better. And I remember watching the Belmont Abbey game with USC a couple of weeks ago, and then I watched East Carolina. And I think I watched the full A, and I was watching the B, and there were 7 minutes where the referee was blowing up this and blowing up that and blowing up that. And I'm like, you almost want to tell the referee, look, they have coaches,
right?
Okay,
yeah,
let them play. Now I'm all about protecting players, but if they're technically doing something wrong, I get that. But a lot of the captains, to adjust that, and a lot of the coaches to feed that. But I just see a lot of slower play. I don't know if you watched the B side of East Carolina, but I mean, there was at minute 22 to minute 28, it went from set piece blow up to set piece blow up.
Right.
It was crazy weird. Going back to what you said about second row, and thank you for the compliment. It's also kind of how I coach forwards. I want my hooker to kind of act like another scrum half. I want my 4 and my 5, my second rows to act like, if you're 4, to act like a weak side. If you're the 5, to act like the open side. I need my 8 to command all of that and direct all of that. And normally as an open side flanker, you're like an A10. Like your weapons, all your systems are open.
Sure.
And your job is to disrupt. But an 8-man's job is to develop, right? To develop from the set piece to an attack that then puts the backs in position. So really learning all those different positions and understanding and then teaching the pack how to break out.
Right.
Because we play 1-3-3-1. So where do you go next? And that's the thing that we try to show younger players quickly. Most logically, the ball's going to go here. Okay.
Right.
So if you're here, how do you come out? How do you break away from the scrum? How do you break up from a maul?
Yeah.
How do you swing that shoulder or swim over to get space and momentum to make impact? And John and I share a lot of philosophies together in rugby, and because we've been together for a long time, and he really kind of lets me kind of do our thing, but explain it in my vernacular to teach them that skill set.
Sure. We're talking about some stuff that's like deep cuts of like coaching aspects of this, but I'm glad that we're kind of talking about it. So somebody's going to find it useful for sure. There's something out there called, it's a philosophy, if you will, of total rugby. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, Tony, but it's like basically any position should be able to play any skill, have any skill set on the rugby pitch. It's very, very philosophy, it's very, very deep cut rugby for sure, but we're kind of talking about that, like different skill sets. Like you wouldn't expect a hooker to be able to be a great scrum half, but sometimes the scrum half is actually in the ruck, so that hooker better be able to pass the ball correctly or confidently at least.
What I don't want to do is sit there and look at the ball and go,
what is this? Yeah, what am I supposed to do with this? Yeah, exactly, for sure.
Seconds matter. Seconds matter.
100%, especially on a rugby pitch, man. The whistle rarely gets blown. It's just free play a lot of the time. So you got to make quick decisions. That's what it's all about. Let's talk about your experience with John Roberts, first at Furman and now at Carolina. I like these colors a lot better, by the way. But has he changed at all as a coach since your early days compared to now?
He is just, he's like a Harley Davidson, right? He's not a cafe bike. He's just a steady torque,
Sure.
and spiritually, which is very important to me as well.
Yeah.
And how you frame your life. We're very traditionalist in the way that we look at rugby. When you play international rugby, you're in coat and tie. There are all these rules. There's all the all the formals that you do when at the close of the game and whatnot. And so I would categorize John and I both as very, very traditional rugby players and coaches. And so he's always had that persona. Of course, he was a playing legend at Greenville, because when I came back, I played over 100 games for Greenville. Actually, John and I got our Centurion pin together.
Nice.
For over 100 15s games, and we got pinned at the same time. And when he originally came there, they actually went up to, I think they maybe been, it was the equivalent of D2 then. They came up and they played in the national championship. They lost, but so there was always Greenville rugby, Greenville rugby, Greenville rugby. And I just couldn't wait. So when my wife and I were moving back from Texas, when I was working for Texas A&M, she's like, well, I want to go back southeast. She's from Asheville. And I'm like, well, I don't want to live in Atlanta. No offense to Atlanta.
Sure.
But I just almost, and not necessarily Raleigh, but in between. So when we were looking at houses, I was actually already on the phone and going to rugby practices, So I got to get my rugby team first, right? Get my gym first, right? So again, there was a lot of, a lot of talk about John. Actually played against John a couple of times. He'll probably tell you a funny story about that.
I'd love to hear that. Yeah.
So he was coaching for Furman, And Greenville, so we were there. Greenville helped raise some of the money for the John Morant Stadium, which we were proud of. He had a mishap with one of the coaches that were coaching the females at Furman, and not of his doing.
Sure.
But this gentleman just made a mistake, and John couldn't. As the head coach of both programs, it couldn't happen again.
Right.
So he gave me a call, and he's like, "Look, I know you're slowing down," because I was getting older, and I was slowing down. That's Zen rugby. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Sure. Yeah.
But so he's like, "Look, I just need a stand-up guy that's going to really be able to coach women's rugby and be respectful the way that you need to be respectful." And he's like, "You're the only name I came up with. Well, you're the first name I came up with." And I'm like, "For you, brother, whatever you ask."
Love that.
So I did that. And then most recently, when he was going to USC, he called me up and he's like, "Hey, is there a Furman alumni with ATL? The professional team in Atlanta?" So I picked him up and we're driving in my van. And so John got a little quiet. He's like, "Well, there's an opportunity here." We were looking at the varsity sports, and A&M had turned varsity sport. Clemson was, and he's like, "It's not going to be varsity, but they're wanting to put on a full-time coaching position."
Right.
And what do you think about that? And I'm like, "What do you need?" And he's like, "Well, a stipend for my salary until I mature it." And I'm like, "Boom, dude, no problem."
Wow.
So if that's one of the things I have to do. And he's like, I'd like you to come out, and help, with the boys.
Yeah.
And I said, sure, I'll do that. But, I live 3 hours away one way.
Sure.
So what we did is during the first, 2-a-days during the first 2 weeks, and that was right after COVID, and that was Dan Golden, and that was Ruckin, those guys. And, it's stepping into such a great foundation that USC had, but rugby in general. And you can go back on another show and explain what COVID did and who would do games, and referees weren't coming to games because of contact stuff. It was just in a state of flux.
Sure.
But John came in, with these young men and realizing the spirit and the talent in that room, building on a traditional program, the alumni support. You talk about Jeff Smoka and now the league. That's just what John does. John motivates, whether you're a good player or whether you're a good coach or whether you're a good alumni or whether you're a good board member, you're all part of that, what makes that club.
100%.
And John is just, he's a legend. He's probably one of the best, I think.
The best description of John Roberts is legend, for sure. John Golden during the COVID era of Carolina rugby deserves a lot of credit for keeping things together. But obviously when John Roberts came in, he's a program builder, I think is a really good description of his style. The elevation of the program is very clear to see since he took over. So it's really cool that you've been there by his side on many, many moments and many, many years in the coaching realm with him, and also playing beside him and then playing against him as well. It's very, very awesome. What's your favorite memory of coaching with John Roberts?
I just really like the essence of him. I love his pre-speeches, to the players. It's a lot of what I used to do, when I was a player. You're getting ready to go on the field and you have that reflective moment where you talk to the players. What we used to do is we used to talk about the 3 things. So we're going to go, what are you going to do? You personally going to do to improve your game to make an impact? Tell me the first one, tell me the second one, and then look at these men. And the third, make that commitment to that, right? And so John uses a method very similar to that.
Okay.
I know there's the first hoorah, and then they come out, but in that moment before that whistle blows, those moments. It's almost like I remember sometimes playing against really, really good teams like the Dallas Reds and stuff. We're like, yeah, we got a chance, and you realize you're getting stomped, right?
Yeah.
Well, I actually thought I had a chance.
Yeah.
But what you don't do is you don't get cheeky. What you do is you learn the lesson. You go,
100%.
you know what? I'm here to learn because I
Mhm.
thought we had a chance, and my God, was I wrong. So
Right.
obviously, there's things I need to learn,
Mhm.
and I think John's really good about that as well. Not that any of us want losses, but I
Sure.
think he really can drill down on an individual player, and that's one of the things that he lets me do. Yeah, after 28 years of playing, I really see the game on a technical level. So I could go to a player, I used to do it with Grant Howard. So he'd
Yeah.
come up and he's like, and he was an outstanding, he was 2-year All-American. But
Mhm.
he'd come and he's like, Coach, I'm working on this. I said, okay, I will see it here, there. Okay. And then at halftime, I'll come in and we might make a foot adjustment. We might
Right.
make this. But just that one little change at angle,
Mhm.
can make all the difference of getting on your feet quicker,
Yep.
being able to poach ball, being able to be able to lead an attack. And of course, he was an 8-man. So that's what I need him to do to develop.
Right.
So John lets me do a lot of that. I do come to the games as much as I can.
Mhm.
I do watch the games. So John just kind of lets me come in and says, these following players want to talk to you. I want you to talk to these following players and
Mhm.
just sort this out with them.
Right.
And that's one of the roles I really enjoy doing.
I mean, I think on the website it talks about player development as part of your role at Carolina in terms of, you're an assistant coach, but you can't be there all the time. You live in Asheville, which, as you're saying, is not exactly close to Columbia, South Carolina. So it's very, very cool that with all of your experience being able to, players being able to reach out to you and try to get better that way, and coach being able to lean on you and your years of experience to help this program forward. How would you actually describe your coaching style? Do you have a description?
A lot of it are kind of some things that I used that I picked up when I was in the military,
Mhm.
teaching small unit tactics. And again, this might sound a little weird, but rugby to me is very similar to small unit combat.
Okay.
You have to have simplified directions. You don't want to use long sentences. Like the phrase "with you."
Yeah.
Like if I'm in a position, I go with you one. They know I'm
Mhm.
coming up on the left side.
Right.
Because you say with you, they're able to triangulate, figure how far
Mhm.
you're away. If they go right and I should be left, then that's the reading the field
Right.
and being able to do your individual skill, but how your individual skill goes into the collective play
Yes.
to advance. And so, John really kind of allows me to help. And when I was going in that regard, and when I was going back to the military, we simplified in what we call TPs and U's: train, pass, and unsat. So if you nail 5 out of 5 times something perfectly, then you categorize that as a train. If you do it 4 out of 5 times, 3 or 4, that's a pass. And if you
Okay.
do it 2 or less, then that's an unsat.
Sure.
So, if you don't understand a grubber kick or kick the space and you didn't cover down correctly, then you might get an unsat. But
Right.
that isn't what you do in the majority of the game. So you want to focus on your individual skill set and then how your skill set fits into your group players, be it
Mhm.
back supporting forward, supporting back. Then you kind of develop the U's, and you take the unsats and train them to passes. You train the passes and you train them, you take them to train 5 out of 5 times. John also and I agree that a lot of times we do a lot of really specialty drills that require a lot of dexterity
Mhm.
when gross motor skills take over. So when you're tired and you're fatigued and you haven't trained when your brain is not getting as much oxygen, it's almost like you're playing rugby with mittens on,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And you need that dexterity, you need that. And so we actually train peak performance. And you've seen some of the work that South Africa did like 8 years ago, and now they got the biometers on.
Mhm.
You look at some of the training that the USA has done, which is basically, okay, you're running with the ball. What's the next thing that's going to happen? You got to take on a player. Can you defeat him or you can't? You're going to go to ground. You
Right.
want that extra yard? No. You want to preserve that ball. Then what do you do? Then what do you do? Then what do you do? So you build all those different layers. So
Mhm.
one, it doesn't become familiar.
Right.
2, you fatigue them and then put them in that situation. So that gross motor skill is pushed aside and you've ingrained that that dexterity, into the brain, to where, your reaction is fine tuned, because you've done it under duress.
I got to say, I would have loved these type of coaching skills and that type of participation when I was a player, because boy, when I got tired, the brain just went away. And I would just knock on balls. I would be like, where am I right now? Like,
Did you try to kick?
yeah, let me kick. I'll kick the ball. It doesn't matter. Yeah, who cares? Yeah. So it was just a big mess. Everybody that played with me was like, God, he was so bad. But yeah, it's partially true. But then again, I was just making poor decisions when I was fatigued. So hey, I could have definitely used some of that dexterity still back then. Let's talk about expectations are very high for Carolina Rugby, as they have been, as John continues to develop the program. There was a bad loss, obviously. What I shouldn't say bad loss, but based on the scoreboard, a bad loss against Queens earlier in the season. You were talking about them earlier watching the game. There's been this transformation that is taking place, which is all positive. From a coach's perspective, how does Carolina meet expectations and continue to establish itself as one of the best programs in the Southeast? How do we maintain that and then exceed expectations?
Yeah, I would say one of the best programs in the country. And it goes back to what you said, and John builds programs.
Yep.
So like you pair it, you overlay that with what Jeff Smoke is doing on the scholarship side, how they went to the university and they figured out whether international students are out of state or in state. John and Jeff working to scholarship certain players that are on development with development coaches. Like we have one from Scotland, we have one from Australia. And so, because these guys have been playing rugby, since they were 5 years old, right? So I always kid around, like the first 7 years of rugby, you're just learning, trying not to get in the way and trying to figure out what mistakes you made and how to get better.
Right.
From 8 to 14 years, you start thinking a little bit more than you do, and and you develop your game a little bit. From 14 to 21, I mean, you're really years of play. You're in the twilight of your play, but you really understand the game.
Sure.
For me, 21 to 28 years, I was just trying to survive.
Sure.
But I was playing Zen rugby, which means, I look and I'm like, there's no way in the world I'm going to impact that. But because of those players, it's probably going to come back to this gap, right?
Right.
And so I'm best in support here, So, we get these boys because we're getting younger players. We get younger high school players that have played, a 1-3-3-1, which is a defense that's used in high level rugby, international rugby, and have these players that don't just play like a Northern Hemisphere style. Right?
Sure.
And they understand, and to get them and just bring them on to, what they can do together. I mean, I played select a couple times, and the cool thing about playing select is everybody's good, right? So if I'm playing 8 or I'm playing flanker, and I know if that center steps into that gap, and even though that guy's big, he's going to go down correctly. He's going to do a front tackle, and then I know I'm just looking to poach ball, right? So when everybody's good, everybody plays better. When everybody plays well, it's a beautiful game. Okay?
Yeah.
And so John understands, in his coaching atmosphere allows just adding layers to their knowledge, add the realism that, hey, you're really not a trained on this. You're really just a pass. So you need to refine, these things with repetition so that, and he does that, with the AAR, after action review, which we use in the military as well. What went well, what went poorly, and what are you going to do different to change the outcome of the game next week? So, if I made a mistake in that game, I'm like, I really need to get with my coach or talk to Coach T or talk to John. And I'm like, I made this mistake. What did I not see? And I was in position, but I didn't do this correctly.
Yeah.
What is that? So that the next game that I play, I built on that. And
sure.
Unsat goes to pass goes to train. And John understands that layering. Players come at different levels, but as the player experience and the level goes up,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to see USC excel tremendously.
I mean, we've talked about this so many times about how encouraging it is to be a Carolina rugby fan right now, because, we're just continuing to climb this mountain together, and we can see the impact that John Roberts has had on this program with assistant coaches like yourself, Jeff Smoka continuing to be involved and helping out monetarily. All of that is huge positive steps where we need to continue to make this thing grow and continue to be a great high-level program, and it will continue to be. Let's move over to With You Weekend real quick. I want to let everybody know that With You Weekend is October the 11th and 12th this year, which is right around the corner, folks. So if you haven't, booked your hotel, you can do that through the website. If you're interested, check out the schedule on the website, which is uscrugby.net/events. There's more information out there on that website. So you and I have had some good conversations during these With You weekends. Can we expect to see you there this year? I know you're a very busy man.
I just wrote it down because
Okay.
I'm putting a star on it because
Love that.
If I'm not in some foreign country, I'll be there.
Right.
But another reason is why I love the With You weekend and why I love the meaning that John has wrapped this in With You. So for non-players, With You is when someone picks up the ball and they're attacking, you identify where you are in relative to space to them.
Yes.
Okay. And so just because we got 2 ears, they subconsciously are triangulating that you're on my left or you're behind me or your voice is not as loud, so you're a little bit farther away.
Right.
So if you're taking on opposition, you might take a right step because you realize I'm on your left to draw that opposition and put me into space. So With You means a lot. With You also means if you go down to the deck, I'm right there for you. I'm going to run over. We're going to preserve that ball. But it's also with you, in life, and what we teach rugby players in the traditional way. And I remember talking to Dan and his group when I came in, and I talked to some of the new parents that had just dropped off their boys this year when they met, the board and the coaching staff and their captains. And just like when your child goes to school, you're a little sad. And I'm like, I said, look, if I could share a moment with you, and they're like, please.
Sure.
When I walked in with John and talked to John Golden for a couple of hours before we came in and introduced all of ourselves and started coaching, one of the things I said was, and I wasn't being dramatic. I said, look in this room, look around in this room. I guarantee you, the best man in your wedding is probably in this room.
Right.
I guarantee you, the godfather for your child is probably in this room, because you're going to struggle together. You're going to work together. You're going to develop together. Even when you fail, these are the people that are going to pick you up. Right. If you're out in the lead with the ball and you need that With You support. So With You to me is all of those different things.
Absolutely. With You is support on the pitch and off the pitch, right? Like you look around when you're at With You weekend, there's a special thing that takes place. For all the folks out there that will be at With You weekend, just take a moment and look around the room at these events. You're going to see people that have known each other for 20, 30, 40 years, and they're talking like they're still in college. There's this thing that comes out in people when they're around people that they played rugby with. It's very, very special. And I get a little emotional thinking about it, because that's what it's all about, man. Like this is a brotherhood where you're talking about the relationships that you build will last a lifetime with these people. It's not just about the rugby on the pitch. That's very important. Obviously, the wins and losses are important at a program like this, but there's outside moments of that where you get to experience and live life with these people. It's really, really special. So that's why With You weekend is so important. It is support off the pitch now for all of us old heads, right? That no longer play. But it's a good time, folks. If you haven't been, please come out to With You weekend. It's a really, really fun and awesome event for sure. Final thing here, Tony, you've been amazing. I appreciate you so much. We could do this for 3 hours and really not fully explain everything. But for any high school, international, or transfer recruit out there that will be watching this, whether that be live or sometime in the future, what would you say to them about coming to Carolina and playing rugby as a Gamecock under Coach John Roberts?
Well, first I would say, the university,
Yeah.
because, I am in international business. I work very heavily with the U.S. Commercial Services Department. And the Dormore School of International Business is like the top MBA international programs in the country, right?
Yeah.
And so anytime like I do refresher courses in commerce, U.S. commerce, international business to make sure contracting and Prevention Foreign Corruptions Act to make sure you're not getting in trouble and everything. They're all taught. A lot of them are taught through the Dormore School.
Yes.
U.S. Commerce is very much down there. My mother went to law school there. She teaches at the law school. My brother went to law school there, undergrad and grad. So most of my USC experience was in opposition and playing guys that played for Columbia. So sure. I know all you alumni because we played together for years and years.
Yeah.
But so one is the institution and the university. And it's just a town that wraps itself very, very well.
Yeah.
And I come from collegiate towns like College Station, Texas A&M, where I was there for a long time. So it's a great environment. It's a great university. There's great undergrad programs and graduate programs. So we got some graduate players that want to come in, play 1 year, and then do some international business study. It's just perfect.
Yeah.
Then you take John. That's bridging cultures, and rugby really does bridge cultures. When I went to Ukraine and the Romanian border, like right after the war started, I brought kit just in case. I brought my Carolina kit, and I found a rugby team in the state of Transylvania in a small town called Cristian, and one of the fire captains, her two sons are twins. They're now playing for Romania U18.
Wow.
And her daughter plays too. So they started building the Christian program, and it's a really good program.
Nice.
And so I have all of this stuff going on, and oh my God, with the embassy and everything. And I just need to shut the machine down and go play a beautiful game.
Yes,
and
sir.
Just get that brotherhood and sisterhood with young players, so I could just turn off all the noise and just play a brilliant sport, And so you'll never not have a friend if
That's
you're
right.
And you travel.
100%. 100%. Tony, this has been fantastic. You are an amazing guest. I can't wait to talk to you again, whether it be on here or off of here. We're going to say 2 words that John Roberts loves to say about Carolina in 3, 2, 1. Spurs up. Heck yeah.
Spurs up.
Thanks, pal. Appreciate you.
All right.
Bye-bye.